Oh, hello. Welcome to another Dragon Plus live stream. As always, I am your host, and as always, every other week, we are joined by Mr. Jeremy Crawford, the lead designer of the Player's
everyone.
Lead rules designer of Dungeons and Dragons, and busy man these days. But we're back in the office, ready to talk through yet another Unearthed Arcana, which dropped week and a half ago at this point, I want to say.
That's when the Rune Night, the Revived, and the Swarmkeeper all made their appearance.
A very Halloween-themed Unearthed Arcana. I don't know if that was timed intentionally or not.
It was actually.
Oh, really? Oh,
yes,
good. All right.
Yes. When I was deciding the order in which this recent batch of Unearthed Arcana would come out in, I wanted the Swarmkeeper and the Revive to be around Halloween.
That's perfect. Yeah. So we will get into the most recent Unearthed Arcana in a moment. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Last week, we desperately tried to do our Dungeons and Doodles episode live, but the internet gods were not in their favor. So we recorded the session. We're going to be airing it immediately following this episode at about 2:05 Pacific time. We'll have Jeff Carpenter, Kayla Klein, and Jake Parker, the originator of Inktober. We'll be doing some Halloween-themed doodles. So maybe it was a good thing. Now we're even closer to Halloween.
So. That's tomorrow, isn't it?
It is tomorrow. Although I'm leaving the office this afternoon for early trick-or-treating. I didn't have this as a kid, but there's a lot of business districts that will just do business trick-or-treating.
And they're doing it today rather than tomorrow?
They're doing it today rather than... I'm assuming because everyone will be doing it in their neighborhoods tomorrow, but we'll do it today.
So the kids get extra candy?
Yes, this is bonus trick-or-treating.
Now, are you going to end up eating that candy?
Depends on the candy. It does depend on the candy. It has to be chocolate and without too many nuts. I think those are my two qualifications for candy.
Got it.
Yes. Are you a Halloween candy fan yourself?
Not really. But see, I'm not a big candy fan in general.
Yeah.
If things get too sweet, it's like, ooh, too much sugar.
Can't have too much sugar.
Oh, yeah, I disagree.
We had a question from last week, actually, from Eisenkong. Do you celebrate Halloween or its spectacular festivities in your D&D games? And if so, how?
Well, the short answer is yes. And in fact, this Saturday, we are having our Halloween episode of my current home game. And that Halloween episode will be taking place in Castle Ravenloft. And now they had already gotten to Castle Ravenloft.
Yes.
And then we had to sort of move the session around on the calendar a bit. So I'm like, ooh, let's get it on to this week so that the session can take place with all our Halloween decorations up. I don't know if any of my players are watching, but there may or may not be some candles lit for this session and some other spooky surprises.
Nice, very nice.
Yeah, and I loved as a kid DMing the original Ravenloft on Halloween, and would often do a very shortened version of it so that you could actually play through the heart of the adventure in one night. And I know many D&D players over the decades have done exactly that.
In the times that you've done that, have your players defeated Strahd? Has Strahd defeated them? Is it an even bag?
I've had both happen.
Okay.
Strahd almost never gets truly defeated in any of the times I've run it. He often will get nearly defeated and then he escapes, or he gets defeated but not permanently and then he pops back up the next year.
Yeah.
We also have usually ended up having a follow-up session or two after the Halloween session, just because people enjoy the Gothic adventure style so much. Now, in my current game, the entire campaign has been Gothic, so that portion of it won't be special because we've had 2 years now a dump truck backed up with Gothic and just buried us in it.
But it's still Ravenloft, so there's
Yes,
still that little
yeah.
bit of extra special Gothic.
Yep. But it is Ravenloft 200 years after the events of the Curse of Strahd. And one of the things I've really enjoyed doing is when the adventurers went in to the castle, I actually gave them the poster map from the Curse of Strahd and told them, after they had searched around in the village of Barovia, seeing if someone had a map of the castle, I said, oh, sure, they found a person who had its old map. And I just gave them the map of the whole castle, really to mess with them, because, again, it's been 200 years, and some very powerful forces have been busy in the castle. And so I have enjoyed surprising my players, where they're following the map, like, okay, it looks like we should be able to go here in the castle, and then they go there, and it's different.
Yeah.
Particularly fun given the fact that two of my players, James Wyatt and Chris Perkins, have both worked on versions of Ravenloft. And so one of my goals was to make it so even they were surprised by what they have found.
I'm going through Netflix's Tall Grass and the Tall Grass Now, Stephen King, where it's like, oh, it's just a field of grass. What could go wrong? And it's like, no. There's no way to navigate this correctly.
So just an idea for everyone out there of how different things are. They, in our last session, made their way down to the crypt, again, following the poster map.
Sure.
The classic crypt.
Let's go to the key locations first.
Yep. And they got down there and discovered the crypt is now a massive functioning meat locker with hundreds of people hanging on hooks.
Oh.
This is a horror game.
Yes.
And so this is not a crypt anymore. And someone has been stocking up. So when we resume on Saturday, they're going to resume shivering in this massive meat locker.
It is such a fun flavor in D&D games, the horror flavor. The monsters have been in there since the first monster manual. And I distinctly remember playing through Ravenloft for the first time as a player, as a kid, and realizing this isn't an adventure I can swing my sword out of. It just isn't the typical approach that our party normally took, and that was terrifying.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because a lot of those old adventures, it was like, well, if I just swing my sword enough times, we'll get through this.
The dragon will go down.
Right.
And I was like, well, not in this case.
Yeah.
Let's see. Before we get into Unearthed Arcana, I did want to mention a few other notes. Dragon Plus issue 28 is now live. We tried so hard to have issue 28 release on 10/28, but we wanted to give it just a couple of more days to get in some final bits of content, but free as always, iOS and Android, and at dragonmag.com. So look for issue 28 there. Next week we will be live streaming at this time, but a bit extended from noon until 2 p.m. Pacific time. We'll have an Extra Life game that we'll be playing here in support of the charity, of course, and I believe we'll be doing a special Rick and Morty themed game, so tune in for that. Lucca Comics and Games is ongoing now. Some of our team is there. Gamehole Con in Madison, Wisconsin is also ongoing now, so some of our team is there. Many of our mods are there as well, watching from afar. I don't know that we have a raffle set up for this week. I gave very short notice, so my apologies. We'll make up for it next week when we do our Extra Life game. We'll raffle off a few things. And if folks...
Including these cute figurines?
Yes, these will be 2 items that we'll raffle off next week during the Extra Life game, the figurines of adorable power.
And they are super adorable.
They are. We've got our owl bear and our red dragon. What else is going on? We've got, speaking of Extra Life, in the DM's Guild, we will be releasing very shortly the Infernal script, the font. We decided to make that available, with proceeds going in support of Extra Life. So also if you want to make use of it for your Descent into Avernus campaign and are interested in using the actual Infernal font, look for that in the DM's Guild.
I also love the cosmic twist of turning something infernal toward the good.
Yes. We're trying to get that around, I think, Halloween or All Hallows Eve, so it also thematically ties in. We've got an adventure going to DM's Guild probably around the 9th, and that will feature a unicorn and potentially a hag as well. And I know.
Oh, wonderful.
And last but not least, in addition to Lucca, GameholeCon will also be streaming at Seattle Children's Hospital on November 9th from 12 to 3 p.m. Pacific. So do tune into that as well. We'll be streaming some extra life games right at Seattle Children's. So there you go. So hey, let's dive into it. If you do have a question, please do preface it with question. But we've got plenty left over from last time, which we can start with one. Would you like to start with a few questions? Dive into the Unearthed Arcana for this week.
Let's do a few questions.
Okay, let's do a few questions from last time.
Since some of them have to do with last week's Unearthed Arcana, and then also just some general D&D questions.
Let's do that. So you did have questions from our last discussion of Unearthed Arcana. The Dawn Seeker asked, regarding the Wildfire Druid's Fire Spirit, does it have a CR, or does it use the player character's level with regards to what it could be polymorphed into?
It does not have a CR. A dungeon master could certainly calculate one, but the intent for this creature, and this was also true for the Steel Defender, formerly called the Iron Defender, that will appear in Eberron Rising from the Last War.
It was alloyed with new things, now it's evolved into steel.
Exactly.
Even stronger.
The intent is for them to not have challenge ratings, partly because you aren't meant to go up against them, but also because they're not actually meant to be available for effects that turn people into other things, or effects that allow you to adopt a creature as a companion outside of the class features that are giving you this thing. So for example, there are certain spells that might say, hey, you get to polymorph so-and-so into a creature of CRX and lower, or provide some other kind of limitation. We don't want you to be able to turn people into one of these wildfire spirits or into a Steel Defender, partly because their stat blocks are not built the way a regular stat block is built. They are built to work with the person who summoned them. If you are looking for an in-world reason for why this might be the case, why suddenly these creatures are not really useful as something you can turn someone else into, for example, and again, I could give a number of examples of sort of what are the outcomes of not having a CR. It is partly because this creature is so connected to the player character, there is something very special about them. With the Wildfire Spirit, for instance, the story is their soul is bonded literally to the druids. And so you can imagine that gives them a special quality that makes it so that certain magic isn't going to work on them.
Sure. You can spoof my website, but not the authentication key.
Right. I mean, that kind of thing. Similar with the Steel Defender. If people are wondering, well, why can't I turn somebody into a Steel Defender? Well, the Steel Defender is a unique creature. I mean, we even give in the flavor for the Artificer that you, as the Artificer, have designed this Steel Defender. It's not like there's sort of a generic Steel Defender and then all Artificers are just maybe making some modifications. No, you made this one. So another way of thinking about these creatures, whether it's the Steel Defender or the Wildfire Spirit, or even the Tiny Servant that appears in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, which also does not have a CR, is these are unique beings that until you see that exact one, you've never seen it before. And magic is just sort of, in many cases, is going to kind of flow off it, like water flows off a duck's back.
All right, well, so there you go. Similar question from the Dark Lorax. Ooh, an evil Lorax. I like that. For the wildfire spirit, how are commands given to the spirit? Are they verbal, telepathic? Is there a limit on the range? How would that work?
So there are a number of features in the game where we refer to a player character giving someone commands. It's usually a companion creature of some kind, like the necromancers, undead companions, some creatures that you might have summoned. If we don't specify a delivery method for those commands, because in some cases we do, sometimes we tell you you're able to issue telepathic commands to them, other times we refer to verbal commands. If we don't specify the delivery method, what that means is a command delivered by any means works. So that could be a spoken command, heard at whatever distance your voice can be heard at. That command could be delivered telepathically if you have a means of delivering commands telepathically. So really, when we say that, it's the most open-ended. It's however you are able to deliver commands, then this creature will obey them.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's ask one more, because this one delighted me. And it's also a little bit Halloween themed. Moving on from Unearthed Arcana, but a bit general. We were talking about illusions last time.
Oh,
how
yes.
They might be implemented during the game. What is sort of the spirit of creating them without bend, folding, and mutilating them? But Hanselman asked, speaking of minor illusions, once a creature is dead, does it then become an object because it is lifeless? So can I create an illusion of a dead creature? So instead of a stuffed boar or a statue, I can create a dead NPC illusion. Would that fool somebody?
So, and I think the question is specifically about minor illusion, the cantrip.
Yes, minor illusion.
Which I think we've talked before on this show, or I've talked with Greg Tito on Sage Advice about the fact that minor illusion, if you do a visual illusion, that illusion, it must be an object. It can't be a creature.
Right.
And this questioner is definitely onto a fun thing in the rules. A corpse.
Is it a dead creature? Is a dead creature an object?
Yes, because once the life leads, it's essentially. I mean, this is dark, but it's meat. It's meat.
Yeah.
It's meat on the ground.
We're getting very metaphysical today. Yeah.
And so yeah, you could use minor illusion to create the illusion of a corpse, but you still need to follow the other specifications of the cantrip. For instance, the illusion has to fit within a 5-foot cube. So you're not going to be able to create the illusion of an adult dragon's corpse, for instance, unless you're creating the illusion of a dragon's corpse that has been folded in on itself like a Boolean cube.
Yes.
and fits in a 5-foot cube.
Or I'm trying to play with perspective, where it's like, oh, is it far away? No, it's just a very small illusion that's cleverly placed.
Yes. So yes, you could indeed create the illusion of a corpse.
Okay, there you go. And again, it's not going to have any of the animations of living creatures, so the illusion, if it fools somebody or not, there are other factors at play there. But
which means if any group of player characters is investigating, say, a murder scene, do try to make sure no one is messing with the area by putting in minor illusions of this or that. This could be particularly relevant if next month someone dives into an Eberron campaign where murder mysteries are often a thing, with inquisitives. Watch out for people, some shadowy figure in the alley using minor illusion to mess up your crime scene.
Oh, that's interesting. We've taken the body and we've created the illusion of a different body, or a body that's perished in a different way.
Right.
Ooh, yeah. All right.
And
it'd be fun.
Or use minor illusion to plant other kinds of physical evidence upon somebody. Now, of course, as soon as you interact with the illusion physically, you'll realize it's an illusion.
Right.
So the clever illusionist will make sure that however they have manipulated the crime scene, that it is unlikely to be an illusion that someone will go up and try to pick up.
Right. It's very Moriarty.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Beware of a Moriarty who has access to all of the illusion spells in D&D.
And knows how to properly implement them without their being easily detectable.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Well, there you go. Let's thank you for answering some of last week's questions. Let's dive into Unearthed Arcana in the time we have remaining. And for folks following along at home, you can download this now from the D&D website. I imagine many of you already have and have done so the day that it went up. If not, Pelham is in studio today. We'll be putting up the appropriate pages as we walk through them. So, Fighter, Ranger, Rogue, where should we begin?
Let's actually start at the back.
Okay.
Since tomorrow is Halloween, it just wouldn't feel right to not talk about the revived.
Okay, so we are on page 4, Pelham. The Rogue, this is the roguish archetype at 3rd level. They can potentially choose to be a revived. And so what is a revived and how does it work?
So the whole concept here is you wake up one day and you are a wily rogue. Mm-hmm. You are known for your cunning. You are known for pressing your luck. And you have an earth-shaking realization. You've been dead before. Possibly dead multiple times, and possibly you're back because maybe you outwitted death in some way, which is a very roguish thing to have done. But you also discover something else. Unlike, say, a revenant, you're not undead. Mm-hmm. And I know, because I know some people wonder, well, couldn't this just be, a revenant? And in fact, in previous editions, we've even provided the revenant as a playable race. That is not what this is, because unlike a revenant, you're not undead. Mm-hmm. You have potentially died and revived multiple times, and you have some task ahead of you, but specifically a task for you as a tricksy rogue. And really the inspiration for this, as I was thinking of how often in stories the roguish figure is the person who not only pulls the thing off that you would normally expect only as someone with like supernatural abilities could do that, but somehow that rogue managed to do it. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what about the rogue who made it all the way to the gates of death and somehow like swindled the gatekeeper, fast talked their way out of being forced into Hades or wherever else their soul was about to be escorted.
Yes.
And then the divine powers would realize someone this clever and someone this dastardly could probably do some work for us. And so send the rogue back. And maybe just keep sending that rogue back. Because rogues are also, at least the archetypal rogue is known for getting themselves both out of danger but also into danger.
So this isn't really a past lives. This is sort of a many lives persona.
So you as the player get to decide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you will get to decide, if working with your DM, have you been dead many times, only a few times, maybe you've been brought back only once. We've intentionally built in some flexibility here because really this is meant to be a really juicy storytelling space where you get to decide with your DM, how did you come back? Why have you been brought back? And then also think further of like what did you do?
Right.
Like did you steal something in the afterlife that has allowed you to come back? Because again, all of this is through the lens of you aren't just somebody who has been brought back. Because in D&D, actually, many people come back from the dead, whether it's through raise dead,
yes.
Revivify, or there are many undead creatures, vampires, zombies, revenants. This rogue is special. This is somebody who has somehow tricked the forces of the cosmos to be able to come back, not through any of the conventional means, and to come back and not have the taint of undeath upon them. Now, that said, because of passing through the gate of life and death, this rogue does come back with some unusual characteristics. For instance, they're suddenly not needing to eat, drink, or breathe, not needing to sleep anymore, having advantage against disease and being poisoned. But then one of the also really fun things that is not only a mechanical benefit, but a great example of a place where storytelling can influence the choices a person makes. They have the tokens of past lives feature. And it's with this is when you finish a long rest, you gain a skill or tool proficiency of your choice. And every time you finish a long rest, you have the choice of keeping either this proficiency you chose or pick another one.
Okay, so something from your past you're able to sort of
Exactly.
recollect and
And-
have a little rest and like, oh, this has come back to me. I used to do this.
Exactly. And it could be you get to role play how this knowledge is coming back to you. You might have remembered it in a dream. Maybe you're having your morning coffee and the way the milk swirls in your mug, it reminds you of something you used to know. Again, makes sense for the rogue because rogues are the most skillful of all of the characters in D&D. Rogues are these sort of walking toolkits. They often end up knowing a little bit about everything. Really, their only near peer in this is the Bard. Sort of the two of them are, sort of the skill monkeys of the D&D multiverse. And then it gets even better in terms of the rogue's connection with the realm of the dead. They get bolts from the grave. And here, you are able to unleash necrotic energy when you use your cunning action. And this use of your cunning action allows you to use essentially your sneak attack damage, but at range, and not having to tie it to a particular attack. This is going to be a great tool for rogues who may be on a particular turn in battle, are more concerned about getting out of dodge by like using their cunning action to disengage or to dash, yet still on that turn would love to be able to do some of their damage. And they can do it by having some of this ghostly stuff come out. And I think if you imagine people in a D&D world who might be used to fighting roguish types, this would be an especially surprising sneak attack to have the rogues suddenly dash across a battlefield and some, deathly bolt of energy suddenly launches out at them.
And then we've got a 9th level feature with an even, well, again, continuing the theme of literally connection with the dead.
Yes. The rogue, because of their journey into the realm of the dead and then their return back to the realm of the living, has gained the ability to speak with dead. And so they are able to cast this spell. And then when they do speak with the dead in this way, they are able to gain further capabilities. And we leave it purposefully open-ended in the feature that this ability you're gaining might either be something you've learned from the spirit you just spoke to, or speaking to that spirit might unlock yet another one of your past capabilities from a past life. And so again, there's this idea of you being on this journey where as you adventure, you're also discovering more and more about yourself.
It does have great storytelling potential, working with your dungeon master as far as the character backstory. There's an unfulfilled mission, something you failed at. Have you left clues for yourself or skills you need to unravel it? Contacts that may no longer be with the living that you need to associate with. So a lot of fun stuff. As the player, you might not want to know what that mystery is.
It could be, depending on what the DM decides, it could be horrific to actually learn. It could be like one of those stories where you learn you might have been a terrible, terrible person. Like you might have been using your roguish abilities to serve evil rulers, for instance, as as a killer for hire. But on the flip side, you might discover that you were more of a kind of Robin Hood figure, and you were using your thievery to help the downtrodden.
Or a mix. Maybe you were evil in your past life, but now learning this, you've decided to sort of right some of your wrongs.
Yes, yeah, which could again be a fantastic character arc. 13th level, you gain the ability when you are dying to speak with the powers of the dead, and you can essentially ask them a yes or no question. And we realized when we designed this could, if this makes it into the game, lead to some wonderfully bizarre scenes where the rogue, tells people, all right, if I fall in this battle, don't bring me back right away. so that I can try to learn something while I am edging toward the other side.
I know the doorman.
Yes.
I just need to talk to him for a minute.
But when the rogue comes back, some of their personality changes. So that is both a cost and an opportunity associated with audience with death. And then finally, they have Ethereal Jaunt, which is an ability that allows the rogue to pop through the ethereal plane to teleport to places where most of our teleportation abilities in the game wouldn't normally let you get. Because normally, with especially lower level teleportation abilities, you need to see where you're going.
Sure.
Whereas this rogue, because they're passing through the ethereal plane, can actually even teleport to places they can't see. Now there's a risk. They might pop right into a solid object or another creature, in which case they're going to take force damage and get shunted someplace else.
Or just the hazards. I didn't realize there was a creature on the other side of this wall.
Yes, like, oh, hello, dragon. I'm now here all by myself. So this also is sort of a delicious roguish ability because rogue players often, I have noticed, love for their rogues to go off on their own and get into trouble.
Yes.
I mean, there is just, and it makes sense. There is something about playing a rogue that invites sometimes wanting to be the loner, sometimes wanting to go sneak off to scout something out away from your loud companions. I mean, every rogue player has been in the situation where it's like, I could have snuck past all 50 of these guards, but because of my clanking buddies and their plate mail, we just, alerted this entire village that's coming down to get us.
From the rogue side, I would say that they might not be looking for trouble per se. They're just looking for something of interest.
Yes.
And if it happens to lead to a troublesome situation, like, what was I going to do?
Yeah.
I had to scratch my curiosity.
Well, and this will allow the rogue to scratch that curiosity instantaneously, but risky. Now, we know there's a risk associated with this, but again, this is the rogue who, if they then are dropped, well, at least they'll get some information.
Yes.
While they're on the threshold of death. This was a lot of fun for us to design. It is also an example of the kind of exploration we can do in a subclass versus, say, a race. I've seen some people online, say, "Oh, could we also have a revenant race?" And again, the game has had that before.
Yes.
But our race design tends to be pretty shallow. You get most of what you get from a race right up front.
Right.
Whereas with a subclass, we can dig deep. Not to mention, again, this is not a revenant. This rogue is not. This rogue is not undead, and if this rogue does make it to the next phase, one of the things I look forward to us doing is enhancing this notion of the rogue being a trickster. They've somehow tricked their way into being alive again.
Right.
And that really is a part of the story of this subclass.
Well, that's the story element does seem like how it fits well with this as opposed to a race, which is the introduction to a character.
Right.
As opposed to you're getting mechanically abilities and rewards at higher levels, but it's also sort of furthering their story in meaningful ways, both mechanically and thematically with however you're creating the characters. So interesting. Yeah. So there you go with the Revived. Again, if you have questions, please do put them in chat. Preface them with questions. We'll compile those for a future episode. Yes, sorry for the tantalizing tease. We're going to be doing the raffle for the Figurines of Adorable Power next week, along with many other things, several other things. I'm going to underpromise. Along with things.
At least there will be at least one thing.
One thing. I can guarantee one thing we will raffle off, including figurines of Adorable Power.
And now Pelham is just torturing everybody by showing them these adorable toys.
I know. I'm being vague. I'm trying to mechanically figure out, hey, we're doing it for Extra Life, but we want to do a raffle. So win the raffle, and if you happen to donate to Extra Life, even $1 as a thank you to, hey, then it's all well and good. So I'm trying to skirt some legal tightropes, but we'll play it by ear. All right, we've also have the Rune Knight and the Swarm Keeper Ranger.
You pick what we do next.
Swarm Keeper for sure.
All right.
Definitely keeping with our Halloween theme today. So we're on page 3. So again, 3rd level, the Ranger can take a Ranger archetype, and one option now is the Swarm Keeper. So what is the Swarm Keeper? What do they do?
If you have ever wanted to essentially be a walking colony, this is the subclass for you. This is the Ranger who has connected to this swarm of fey spirits that manifests in a form that is really up to the Ranger's player to choose. It might be a swarm of rats, butterflies, centipedes, snakes, little, cute birds. The flavor really can go in many different directions. So this Ranger could be horrifying. This Ranger could be adorable, like these figurines.
Yes. Is it a Disney swarm of chirping birds, or is it, Ninja Scroll? There's a great demon that carries bees within the honeycomb of his body.
Yep, yeah. You absolutely could be a walking honeycomb with your spirit bees swarming around you. And so again, this subclass has some fantastic story potential for the Ranger. At the beginning, you learn some spells that will help you realize this story. You have your fairy fire, web, gaseous form, which lets you, if you imagine turning into almost a swarm yourself, this sort of misty form with your bees or your butterflies or whatever it is that's swarming around you, moving. I mean, this Ranger, even with actually the butterflies or the cute birds, could be rather terrifying.
As Chad has pointed out, you could be the prototypical crazy cat lady.
Oh yes,
You've got your swarm of cats.
Yes,
it fits in very nicely here.
Absolutely. In fact, I think if I play a Swarm Keeper, I will probably have a swarm of cats. Mostly because I love my cats so much.
Aww.
You also get Mage Hand, and our idea here is that, and we talk about this, that when you cast Mage Hand, the hand takes on the form of other nature spirits. So it's not just this spectral hand out there doing something. It might be your centipedes, or your kittens,
right,
or your snakes, or whatever it is.
Making it like dog pyramiding themselves into whatever shape they need to accomplish the task at hand.
Depending on the form that a particular Ranger swarm takes, I can imagine some groups loving it, oh my gosh, it's Timothy the Ranger and his adorable kittens, or it's Cassandra and her snakes, and oh my God, will she please get out of here quickly?
Right. We hate it when she serves dinner this way. It's just revolting.
It's like, can you please hide the snakes,
Come out with
please?
each entree. It's
Yes.
delivered in a horrible way.
Yes. Like, do you really need the snakes to bring the platter out using the Mage Hand?
It's my smart. That's how I do it. It's
Yeah.
how I serve dinner.
Yes.
You didn't have to accept the invitation.
So really, now I'm imagining this ranger will be one of the waiters in the banquet scene of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
Here come some
food.
beetles.
Yeah.
Maybe a swarm of monkey brains. Whatever the ranger decides. So once you have this swarm of face spirits, which I should point out should not be confused with the swarm monsters that are in the monster manual.
Mm-hmm.
We're using the word swarm here,
Right.
but we specify for you here in the subclass what that means. We very purposefully are not pointing you at any of the swarm stat blocks in the monster manual because the swarm you command is not one of those monsters. And instead is this very versatile swarming collection of spirits. So one of the great things you can do is you can agitate the swarm, and this is the ability you get at 3rd level when you adopt this wonderfully bizarre archetype. And this allows you to deal extra damage when you hit a creature with a weapon attack because your face spirits, in whatever form, again, you've chosen for them to have, they are joining in on the attack. Because this extra damage is being dealt by these spiritual beings, the damage type is force. Force, for anyone who doesn't know, is generally the magic type we use basically for just general magic damage. You know, essentially, if it's magical and it doesn't fall into any of the other categories, you know, it's not fire, it's not poison, it's not thunder, it's not lightning. If essentially we go down the whole list and it's no to everything but yes to magic, it defaults to force. And also, force is also great because of our damage types. It is almost never on the list of damage types that creatures resist or are immune to. I mean, there are some exceptions.
Right.
This is an exceptions-based game. But force often gets to wiggle past many damage types. And so we are very intentional about including this here, not only because it's spirits dealing this damage, but we also actually wanted, in a very subtle way, to give the ranger this nice way to do damage that will bypass most resistances and immunities. Then, at 7th level, I mean, what could be better than not only having a swarm, but having a writhing tide of a swarm? And now,
very evocative terminology in these powers.
Yes, yeah. And Dan Dillon did a lot of the wonderfully ooky names here. And here, whenever you use your gathered swarm ability, you can also choose a benefit that gives you a special mode of movement, whether that is letting you disengage as a bonus action and having a higher walking speed, or scuttling along a ceiling, or hovering around with a slow flying speed. It's because your swarm is essentially lifting you up. And now I'm imagining that Timothy character I made up a moment ago, levitating, held up by a swarm of adorable cats.
It's very like 300, where Xerxes is on his platform,
Yes.
being carried by kittens instead
Yes.
of his servants.
But wait, you don't just get to make it writhe. It also, the eyes get to scuttle. And so at 11th level, the ranger is allowed to send out basically a piece of the swarm to go out and scout. And again, this scout, depending on the ranger, could be adorable or horrifying. You decide. And this is a fabulous way for the ranger to not only scout something out for themselves, but also, of course, for the rest of the party, without putting someone in the party in danger.
Right.
But I know if
Just
I was
the adorable kitten.
I know, gosh, if I was playing Timothy, the cat keeper, I would still be concerned about my spectral kitten that was going and checking things out. The Swarm Keeper culminates with a storm of these minions. So this allows you essentially to cause a big, essentially a big explosion of whatever it is your swarm is. Not only does it deal damage and blind people, but if any of this damage is dealt, you can also drain life.
I'm picturing the kittens.
The
now,
kittens.
just-
Well, cat scratches can
yes.
really smart.
Yes, kitten scratches can even smart.
Yep.
They are sharp stilettos attached to their little paws.
Yeah,
and
so
they don't
you-
know how to use them.
You better watch out for my spirit kitten scratching you and dealing necrotic damage to you.
This has happened to me. Years ago, I remember taking a bath because I am a bath person. I love baths. And then we had...
I feel like I'm talking to, did you come from a time machine, in a time machine from the 19th century?
I find them soothing and relaxing. You take a bath, you read whatever it is you're going to read. Nowadays, you've got your phone. But this was years ago, and we had 2 cats, one of which was exceptionally curious and looked into the tub, didn't know it was a kitten, didn't know what it was. Jumped in
Oh my gosh.
and just freaked
Oh,
the hell
boy.
out as it was trying to get out, and I'm sitting there getting scratched as this kitten is trying to escape.
See, I'm imagining the horror movie version of this where then, the bathtub fills with blood because you realize it's one of the spirit kittens.
It is. It's turned on its owner. Oh, the horror. You gotta keep treats for your swarm as
Yeah.
the swarm keeper, or they could turn on you.
Yeah. So I think this subclass will be a ball for people
Yes.
who are looking for a very different kind of ranger. Still a person of the land and connected to the spirits of nature. But again, they've decided to bring a nature colony along with them.
Right. Well, instead of a panther, you
Right.
can have a swarm of kittens now. So there you go. you get to choose.
Yes.
All right, we're getting kind of close to the top of the hour, so should we jump over to the fighter and cover a bit of the Rune Nights before we run out of time?
Yes. So
Okay,
the
let's
Rune
do
Knight, the Rune Knight is actually a reconcepting of the Sorcerer Giant Soul subclass that we released in Unearthed Arcana some time ago.
Okay.
Looking at that playtest feedback, we saw it was clear people really loved this giant theming, pardon me, the sense of rune magic.
Yes.
But it was also clear in the playtest feedback there was some friction between the concept that we had for the subclass and the class it was attached to, the sorcerer. And there have been a few other times we've done this through the Unearthed Arcana process, where we've introduced a subclass for one class, looked at the playtest feedback, and then in later ended up actually moving that subclass to another class.
Right.
So here we've taken what was the giant soul, and we didn't just transfer it over, we completely reconcepted it, but still its bones are all about giant magic and runes. And so this night, and I love imagining this night in play because I just aesthetically love the idea of playing a fighter with these ancient runes carved in my armor and on my shield, on my longsword.
Right, yeah, the blade of the sword. Are
Yes.
they tattoos? Are they drawn on? How does it work?
And so I think just visually the Rune Knight is super tasty. And it's also fun because we got to design a bunch of different rune effects. Ben Petrosor, a designer on staff, took point on this and explored what would different runes associated with different types of giants do as a part of sort of a fighter's kit. Whether, pardon me, the fighter had inscribed them on armor, shield, or a weapon. Now, one of the questions I've seen on Twitter is, can the Rune Knight inscribe these runes on their friends' armor, weapons, and shields? As written in this Unearthed Arcana, nothing prevents the Rune Knight from inscribing the runes on their friends' equipment. However, the way we wrote the rune effects, your friends can't do anything with them. So, yes, technically you can put the runes on your friend's equipment, but the runes don't do anything unless you're the one using them on your equipment.
You're the beneficiary.
Yeah, and that's a great example of something we would clarify in the next round of Unearthed Arcana.
Meanwhile, you've drawn all over my stuff.
Yes.
I didn't ask for this.
Yes.
And I'm not even getting any of the benefits here. But they're beautiful to look at. So thanks, Dave.
This fighter, one of our design goals for it, in addition to having this great runic and giant flavor, is to give this fighter a bunch of versatility. We in 5th edition have presented some fighters that are very straightforward, the champion being the prime example of that, but even the samurai in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, pretty straightforward. But then we also have a fighter like the Battle Master, where it is this whole world of options inside the subclass. And with the Rune Knight, we're exploring a similar kind of approach where this fighter has a bunch of different options to choose from, depending on which runes they inscribe, because each one not only does something when you activate it, but each rune also has an ongoing effect that you benefit from while that rune is on your gear. Now, a person might be wondering, wow, is this fighter super duper powerful? It is. and I think,
there you go.
I think you and I have talked about this before. We always, when we do playtest, we would always rather shoot over past the mark when it comes to power level than have something be underpowered. Because it is actually easier for us in the development process to rein something in than it is to have something that's super underpowered and then have to do a bunch of extra design to get it up to the desired power level. Design that then might have to go back into playtesting.
I imagine the other side of that might also be if it seems a little powerful, there's also more enticement to pick it up and play it around the table then as well.
For some groups, although it's interesting, we have found again and again, many groups are not that enticed by power. Certainly players who really value a highly optimized character will feel the enticement of heightened power. But we see again and again when we look at playtest data, people will sometimes intentionally pick what others might think of as suboptimal options because those options help realize a particular personality, a particular backstory, or just tickle the player's fancy in some other way.
Yeah, I agree, and I've discovered this. I've seen this. It's the story concept that the player has, whether it's great in some way or terrible in some way. It makes them memorable, and it just makes them a character, a more, not resounding, just a memorable character for the player.
Absolutely. Now, even though we know there are people for whom character power is not that big of a deal in their D&D play, it's still important to us to get the power level right for the play experience that the majority of D&D fans are looking for. And so that's one reason why the Unearthed Arcana process is so valuable. We will put things out, again, sometimes knowing we've overtuned it. And a number of our recent Unearthed Arcana subclasses went out the door, and we knew this is more powerful than it will be if this ever becomes an official option. But again, it's far easier for us to do that and then rein in a little bit than to do the reverse. And our fans are fantastic at letting us know what's working for them, what's not working for them. once we get sort of the thumbs up from the community that they want us to do more work on one of these, that's then when we really buckle down on, okay, we're going to make this an official part of the game. Now it's time to make sure these numbers are really adding up the way we want them to. But initially, we just want that thumbs up.
Sure.
And are you liking it? Is this a concept you'd love to see more of?
An important initial question, I imagine, that needs to be answered with any new option.
Yeah, and this is again one I would love to see make it into the game, simply because it's like I want to play this fighter. To just have to just be decked out in these ancient runes, and the effects of these runes are also broad enough in terms of storytelling potential that if a DM was running a game for a Rune Knight in a world where runes are not associated with giants, because that's the default in D&D,
right?
But it certainly doesn't have to be in a DM's home game. It would be super easy to essentially reskin this and just give a different story explanation for the runes. But whatever the explanation, I think this character would just look awesome in various scenes.
I agree. It is. I'm gonna hit the pause button. We're at 2:00, but perhaps next time we'll dive a bit further into the Rune Nights specifically. We've got questions that have come in from chat as well, and so we'll always have lots to talk about. So, all right. Again, if you missed it at the top of the hour, we mentioned last week we failed utterly to live stream our Dungeons and Doodles. But Pelham has recorded it, edited it. We're going to be putting that live here in a couple of minutes. So we've got a special bonus Dragon Plus this week. So again, we're going to be doing a pre-recorded Dungeons and Doodles with Jeff Carpenter, Kayla Klein, and Jake Parker. So that will be firing off here in a couple of minutes. So do stick around. It's Halloween themed. So I think we're going to showcase some of the results across social media tomorrow. We'll see. We did I'll give a tease. We did some great monster-themed jack-o'-lanterns, how those would work in the world of D&D. Costumes. There's some Minsk and Boo action. Jake Parker was the artist in charge of Dungeon Mayhem Battle at Baldur's Gate. So we've got some Minsk and Boo making an appearance too. So all good things.
Fabulous.
So yes. So stick around in a couple minutes. We'll get that going. Thanks as always to everyone tuning in live for an out of your time. We'll be doing a raffle when we are live streaming next week for our Extra Life game. Thanks, as always, to our followers, to our subscribers, to our moderators, of course, and a shout out, thank you to our playtesters as well. We've been talking Unearthed Arcana, and of course, the survey that goes up for the Unearthed Arcana, the feedback is essential and an important part of it all. So we do need to hear from you. Thanks to everyone involved with Extra Life, and again, we'll have some more material going up on the DM's Guild in the days ahead. And thank you to the playtesters who were involved with that as well this year. It's a great process. It's a terrifying process to realize, like, ooh, this did not come out the way that I thought it did.
Yep.
Invaluable to have playtester eyes on it and tell you that.
Yes. Yep.
So thank you to everyone. So yes, we'll be back next week with our Extra Life game of Rick and Morty, and then in 2 weeks, will you be free to rejoin us?
I think so.
Okay, we'll schedule that in. But thank you for spending an hour out of your time to sit down with us again.
I always enjoy it.
Yes, and happy Halloween.
Thank you. To you too.
All right, everyone. We'll fire up Dungeons and Doodles here shortly. Happy Halloween to everyone watching, and get ready for our Halloween Doodles episode.
Bye.